Gidadam Skatanow, Lindsay Knight Nisigasun, aka Eekwol. I greet you all. I'm so humbled and honored to see all of you here, or to see the number of people that are here in our Zoom meeting. Really happy that you could join me today and share some of the story of this experience that I've had being the storyteller in residence, which is the pilot program at the University of Saskatchewan. Um, it's been a 6-week program, and it's been really neat in the sense that I was sort of given the freedom to just be creative and be able to do what I wanted, what I always do in my art and my experience, and just that sort of freedom to work with that while engaging with the community. So this today is the result of that. And once again, I'm just so happy that you're all here to share that with me. And I know we have people from all over. I know there's some students. So, hey, how's it going in your classrooms? And for all of you that are comfortably at home, doing your work at home, all of that, we're all here together, and let's just have a good time for the next hour. So what I did before I guess I'll premise it. I came into this experience sort of not knowing which direction I wanted it to go, and a lot of times with my artistic practice and my music, I let, I guess, my spirit guide me. I let sort of I guess reactions or things that are happening in the world. I let those things guide me and direct me in the way that I'm going to be doing things. So I don't really pre-plan too much, and that's, I think a lot of us as artists get that, because it's as creative people, sometimes things just pop out of nowhere and then you work with them. And for this particular residency, I guess the first thing was a residency, if you know or maybe don't know, is when you go into a place and you're there, right? You're there, with the public, you're consulting with the staff, and you're talking and visiting and sharing your art and maybe giving some advice and all of that. So, of course, in COVID times, I've been at home this whole time and I haven't had a chance to go into the library. So that's been a bit of a challenge, because a lot of times with a residency, you want to feel the energy of the space, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So I'm hoping, and I'm pretty positive that by next year, if this continues, that the lucky person will get to be in the library and able to experience it in that way. So here's to hoping. The other thing that I want to point out is that I'm really honored that I'm a hip hop MC. I've been doing that for most of my life, and I write lyrics, I rap over beats, and that's how I do my creative work. That's the kind of artistry that I do. So the other really important thing is for the library to decide that I would be a good fit for the Indigenous Storyteller in Residence is really cool, and it shows that there is sort of room for growth and room for adaptations into what we're doing today. Because if I asked you, especially the younger ones, if I asked you right now who listens to hip hop or who knows about hip hop, I bet you a lot of hands would go up. I bet you that whole grade 6 class, your hands would probably go up, right? So it's something that it's a medium. It's a way to tell a story. Hip hop lyrics have always been my way to tell my story. And I grew up, I'm half Nehiyaw, which is Cree. And I grew up, fortunately, I grew up in my Cree, with a Cree understanding in ceremony. Most of my family are Cree, and that's all I know. So that's sort of my family upbringing. So I was raised in that Indigenous knowledge space, and I thank my parents for I guess giving giving that space to us as kids, allowing us to experience that space. A lot of times we would call that sort of shifting or breaking cycles. And I was lucky that we were a part of that. My family has a history of residential school, day school. So we all know and we're familiar with the results of colonization in day school and residential school. And some families are able and capable and have the space to switch some of those cycles. Not everybody, but I was fortunate to be in that. So I know a lot about my culture, and but also I grew up as an urban member. So I grew up in the city. I grew up mostly in Saskatoon, a little bit in Winnipeg. I went out to the res quite a bit, but I've never actually lived out there. I have a lot of family out there in Muscadet First Nation. And so I have that experience of being out there, but mostly in the city. And as Indigenous people in the city, we've been here for a long, long time, and we've adapted and created space that works for us and that works for our culture and our understanding and our worldview. So hip hop is one of those things. And hip hop comes from the Bronx. It's derived from in the 1970s, young black kids and Latino kids and some Native American kids came together in the inner city in the Bronx and created hip hop. And it started with beats, it started with lyrics, it started with breakdancing and graffiti writing. So those were the four main elements of hip hop. And this was a way for these kids who were struggling, who were poverty. There's a lot going on in those times in the Bronx. They found a way to kind of get together and express themselves creatively in a positive way. And they had nothing. They just would hide in a warehouse and they would make a beat literally by banging on a wall. And then they would rap along to that beat and they would dance to that beat. And so hip hop is derived from that, and we I always acknowledge that because it's not mine to own, but I use that medium, and a lot of times our Indigenous young people really connect with hip hop, and I think it's because of that. It's that relate. There's a lot of related. There's a lot of parallels, and one of those is that idea of struggle and coming through. Being in a colonial state, there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of things that we're working through and trying to endure. And so it makes sense that there might be a way, especially in the urban centers, that hip hop might be attractive and might make sense. So that was me when I was 13 years old. That's where I started. I started hearing rap and hip hop, and I heard people telling stories over beats, and I thought, oh my God, that is so cool. I have to do that because I had always told stories in my own way. I had always been that kid who had stories to tell. And I had always written lyrics, I had always written poetry. And when I heard the beat, I thought, okay, this is what I have to do. And 15 years later, no, just kidding, I'm not that young. A few years later, here I am. I'm still doing it. I'm a mother. I have two kids. I'm a PhD student here at the U of S. I do a lot of things other than hip hop, but hip hop is always one of those huge roles that I have and that I carry with me. And I probably will, for the rest of my life. So, yeah. So, in a nutshell, I am grateful that I'm able to sit here and share that with you guys. Because a lot of times, as Indigenous storytellers, um, the first thing that a lot of people think about, including us as Indigenous people, is, sitting around a fire, maybe in a teepee, and mushum, which is grandpa, or cookum, which is grandmother, is telling a story, maybe a Wasagi Chuck story or something like that. And we think about that as storytelling, and that is storytelling. But also as Indigenous people, we're very adaptable and we're always changing and moving in new ways and shifting in new directions. And this is an example of how storytelling goes. And there's a lot of different genres of music where we're telling stories. There's a lot of different ways in which we're telling our stories. So I guess we need to move past that idea that you have to sit around a fire and tell a story. So um, one of the ways that we did that was with the university. I set up some coffee talks, and we called them the virtual coffee talks. And I had three of them, and we were able to meet up. And I know some of you are sitting here, so I'm thankful that you were able to come, and you might hear, a piece of something that you might have talked about. As I had said, when I put this piece together, I'm going to include some of the things that I'd learned. And the frame or the focus that I wanted to use, being an Indigenous person, going to the university, living in Saskatoon, I wanted to think about that term identity. And we hear that term identity, and you can think about this on your own. And maybe if you're in a class or if you're at home, you could even jot down, identity. When you think of your identity, what are the first things that you think about? So a lot of times it's, obviously, maybe you identify your gender, your name, where you were born, your parents, people you're related to, your job, the school you go to. So these are all things that add to our identity. But the thing about identity is that it's always shifting and changing. And that's where the story comes in. And that's where I'm really interested. I'm interested in your stories because we all have them, they're all a part of us. And when we start to really look at our identity a bit deeper, we start to realize that our story is pretty interesting. One of the main things, and I talk about cultural identity because we talk about heritage. If you're here as a settler, then you have an identity that comes from Europe or any country that your grandparents or grandparents come from. And then you think about that. You think about all of those, the heritage that you have, and those heritages that many of us have. For me, I'm Nehiao. My mom is Russian, a little bit of Polish. I just found out recently when I went up north one time that I guess my great grandpa, my Chapan, was half Scottish, half Cree. So I guess I'm Scottish too. And I just realized that recently. So my identity shifted there. And so also with identity, you think about who's around you. So your kin, and that's your family. That can be your biological family, but that can also be those people that are in your life, your friends, but you think of them as family because they've been so close to you all this time. Your partner, all of these, your pets, all of these people and these living beings are a part of your life. They're part of your identity, and they come and go, right? Sometimes they come and go. Some of them stay forever. So me as a mother, I'll always be a mother. That's one thing that'll never change. um my kids will always, have a mother, but they're also going to grow up, and maybe they'll move out. They can live with me forever if they want, I don't care. But they'll probably move out and probably want their own lives. So that their identities will change too. So identity is everything. That's what I've learned in our coffee talks, where we shared our stories. And so what I want to do for you now is to start by, I guess I want to share a bit about what I wrote. So what I do is I react, and I put things together, and I put them down on, well, I type them down. I used to write them on paper, but let's be honest, nobody writes on paper anymore. So I put them down, and I really thought about it because when we think about identity, cultural identity, institutional identity, being at the university, there's all of that too. As a student, that's a part of your identity, and there's a lot of layers that come with that too. As an Indigenous student, there's an identity. So I'm going to share this piece with you, and yeah, and I'm going to gift this piece to the library for giving me this space to share. I'm so grateful for it. Adapting, unfolding, reworking by knowing, cautious in one moment, reckless in the next, circular and fluid like new life in the womb. She, her is learning. She, her is moving from missing to found, building from nothing, off pieces lying around. But in this moment, in this movement, this action, she, her comes to know how blood has memory and history in the flow. And in this moment, she, her is journeying home. In each travel, each distance, strands collect layers. They weave stories together, no matter where that teller is in place. They, them track slow, aimless, but still in a direction, led by the feeling that harnesses introspection. All this heritage and no way to sort it. Who's claiming who and who cares where they're going? But again, it's circular, it's fluid. It gains momentum and slows in the blink of an eye, gives and takes and laughs and cries. And as the sun sets on they, them in ceremony, finding meets found, stars all around. It's beyond human, it's visceral, it's sound. And as the strands remind as they pulsate and glow in the dimness, we're always connected, grounded, placed somewhere. Our bodies are just a part of who we are. Our bodies are just a piece of who we are. Our stories are beyond our bodies. Our stories are collecting in universal futures. Thank you. I'm starting to get used to, I've been doing a lot of performance over this. I have a little studio set up and I do my, performances. I'm asked to do some live stream performances. And so I'm starting to get used to not having an audience and not having clapping and that kind of stuff. But I thank you for the emoji hearts and yeah, so that's the piece that I wrote, and it's a little bit, it's not my own. I a lot of times the things I write I don't claim, because a lot of times it's from ideas, from everybody's ideas and opinions, and I just put them together. And that was one example, just from some of the beautiful things that people said in these coffee talks, and some of the beautiful ideas that come from learning about our identity and knowing who we are. But the main thing that I always do, always in all of my music and my pieces, is I think about my kids. I think about my two little ones. I have an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I think about how they'll hear what I'm doing. And I think about how they'll, listen to the songs that I write, and that they'll listen to the words that I say. How they will. I never force them to, but they listen, and they have their own way of interpreting. Um, and before I had kids, I used to be, I used to sort of rap about stuff that maybe, I wouldn't do now. But, identity, we're always shifting and changing. I was kind of a crazy kid, and, and then I had kids. So everything that I do, I think about how they'll react. And one of the songs that I want to share with you today is the song that I wrote for my daughter. And this is not a new song. It's I wrote it in 2016. And I wanted to share it with you because one of the parts of residencies is being able to work on your own stuff, and work on your own, pieces. And one thing that I had always wanted to do was sort of figure out why I wrote things. and write it down, because I get a lot of schools, a lot of institutions, a lot of teachers, a lot of professors asking for me to explain why I wrote a song. And it's sometimes I don't have time, or I forget to respond to emails. I'm pretty bad when it comes to that. So I thought, why don't I just write them down and try to, have them there so that I can just like send them and then they're there. So one of those songs is when I had my girl who was 8 years old, and I decided that I'm only writing for them. I wrote her song. Her name is Kasey, and Kasey in our Cree language means compassionate. And she really lives up to that name. She's a very compassionate being. She came home from school the other day and she was worked up, and she was just, I want to start a bug revolution. And I said, what's a bug revolution? She's like, there was one of those, those bugs that are in the basements of schools and houses. They're like, some people call them Halloween bugs. They're maple bugs, those little cute bugs. But we've always taught her just through example that we never kill bugs, because as part of our worldview is that bugs are no better than us, and we're all living beings that have a right to live here, and humans are no better than anything smaller than us. So she didn't like it when a kid at school um, took one of these bugs and just like crushed it, and she was crushed. She couldn't believe that somebody could just do that, eh? And she's like, I want to start a bug revolution and stop people from killing and harming bugs. And I thought, oh, this is my girl. This is the girl of my heart, because she grew up around me. I'm a lot of I don't call myself an activist, but I'm a realist, and I think about how we can better this world, and for them and for her. And she's seen me in a lot of protests and walks and that type of thing. We went to the Black Lives Matter march there, where there was thousands and thousands of people, and those kind of things will never leave my memory or her memory. So she gets riled up, and she's just like me, but for the bugs. So I said, well, maybe in the spring. So all of you keep your inboxes open. I'll be sending you a bug revolution. We'll meet at City Hall and maybe do that. So yeah, so she's very compassionate. So I want to share this song with you, and this is her song, and it's called Kasey's song. And I'll share it with you, and then I'll share a bit of the story with you. I'm just gonna pull it up here. Can you hear the beat? Okay, good. Iskewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. What we do when we do this. She's the reason, the purpose, the music. New rhythm to life, we sing beginnings. Exhale the next lyrics beyond the dreaming. Never asked for much so far. Still been given more than my share. Daughter, mother, Nooklum, sister, auntie, niece. Live the truth beyond belief. And I know that action speaks. Hard work, hustle back, break to the beat. And I know that nothing comes cheap. I've never been idle, never been asleep. Those who remember all the stories bound to the fire, acknowledge every morning, feel the heat as it starts to rise. The flames are growing, kissing the sky. Iskewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. Iskewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. Now I gotta let you all in on something. When I knew she was a girl, I started drumming. Gather strength as a stick tapped the hide. Felt a little spark from that light inside. I knew right there it was time for take back. Conjure ancient knowledge to combat attacks. And this little girl would know her story. To never stop learning and never be sorry. And live the good life like she was meant to. Stick to family and friends and those who respect her. If we give in to the lies, we fall deeper. Too many fires put out without enough keepers. My girl, those before you light the sky. Flares in the night, the first to survive. Feel the heat as it starts to rise. The flames are growing, kissing the sky. Yeah, they're kissing the sky. But still we watch thousands and thousands pass us by. We need to keep asking why. Iskwewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, hey, fire within. Iskwewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. Iskwewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. Iskwewak, iskoteo, tapwe win. Woman's heart, fire within. Thank you. So I'll start with explaining the Cree there, and the Cree words Iskwewak is of course our women. So in our Cree language we don't have like gendered terms so much, because gender was never a big thing. It was like, of course we have women and men. We have what we call the sexes. Women have womb to for babies, and but as far as gender and gendering, we didn't really do that. We had, if you were a good hunter, it didn't matter if you were what sex you were. You would just go do it. And if you were really good at taking care of kids, you would stay home and take care of kids. It wasn't, we didn't focus on that. And one of the facts about that is that there's no word for like she. There's no word for he. So I remember my cookum, she spoke Cree, but she mostly spoke English to us. She went to residential school and she thought that, it was good for us to know English. But we'd have people when we were on the res, people would come visit, and it'd be a man coming to visit, and she'd say, "Oh yeah, she just came over to pick up the saw," or like, so, "Oh yeah, she wouldn't differentiate. She wouldn't call men or women he or she, but in English she would just try to say one of them. Like it doesn't matter which one. Just she. So yeah, so that's that gender thing is really important. But as far as womanhood, manhood, and that being that sex, having that ability to create life in different ways. Iskwewak is that woman, that ability to create life. Napewak is the men, so the ability to create life in their way. So that's the sort of the basic foundation of that. There's a lot you can read about and learn about all of that, and there's a lot happening with that, with gender right now. So it's really, really exciting. We talk about resurgence in our Indigenous cultures, and that's kind of taking back our remembering how things used to be, before colonization and a lot of the, I guess, paternal or patriarchal ways that we do things today. So back to Kasey's song. So I'll read you just a little piece that I wrote about it. So when I found out that I was pregnant with a girl, my first reaction was excitement and then fear. And then the lights went out. Ooh, this is a scary story. I'm just kidding. Okay. I realized that I had to raise a girl. And being a girl, I knew the challenge that came with identifying as a female in this patriarchal society. I was scared that she would struggle with identity and self image like I did. I worried that would be in danger like I was. I worried so much because I carried deep trauma and was already placing this onto an unborn child with my worry. I decided to write about it as I always do when I feel it's something that I can't process. So I wrote a letter to her, and that letter turned into this song. I wanted her to know that her Nehiyaw heritage holds great power and connection to these lands. I thought about all of us as Indigenous women of all ages and felt a surge of determination to voice these truths. Kasey's 8 years old now, and to this day, she loves this song. It's hers to keep. Writing it taught me how to raise her, unapologetic and fiercely Nehiyaw. She's so much more aware than I was, and as I worked through my traumas, I learned what was missing for me, and to make sure that she experiences the beauty of the Iskateo, which is the fire, and the Tapwe wind, which is the truth of being an Eekwol. And this is the story behind this song. So that's where the story came from. And it was weird because I talk about that story, when I'm talking about that song. But when I actually wrote it down, I I cried. I cried because it was a different way of storytelling for me. I'm so used to being on this microphone and telling stories like this. But when I wrote that down, I cried, and it just, it hit me in that different way. It hit me in a different piece of my identity, that I'm still working through. So yeah, that was pretty interesting and pretty exciting at the same time. And it's funny because my kids, they're so used to my music. They're so used to I've been performing when they were in the womb. I was performing, jumping around on stage, and they're so used to it that they're so honest about it, eh? And my son, who's 12, he's been, traveling with me when we used to travel, a year ago. And, he used to I call him my sonager because he's really honest about about the job. um it's funny because as musicians and artists, a lot of times we make mistakes on stage, and what I've learned, from my uncle Chester Knight, who's also a musician and artist. I learned a lot from him in his stage performance. He's like, don't ever apologize for making a mistake, because guaranteed 99% of those people don't know. They don't know that you made a mistake. So I stuck with that. But of course, I had 100 people in the audience that night, I think, and I made a mistake, and of course one of them was my son, and he was that 1% after. He's like, "Oh, mom, you really messed up those lyrics in that one song, eh?" It's like, yeah, yeah, I did. Thanks for pointing that out. So yeah, so that's my sonager. But kids, if any, all of us that have kids, um, I love that because they keep us humble, hey. So I wanted to share another one with you. And this one is actually one of the first songs that I ever did. And this was actually before I had kids. Um, what I'll do is, well, I'll read the story to you, and then I don't have the beat to this song. So I'll just sort of read the lyrics to you. It's an old song. I don't really perform it that much anymore, but I thought, since we're sharing stories, and this is one that I wanted to dig up and look at. So actually, no, I'll do the song first. So the song is called Too Sick. When the sun stood high in my ancestors' eyes, a warrior sat on the earth with a smile. The rays reflected his frame, shadowing his profile. I was prepared to share my life with his mind and ability. The forest, plains, fires, all structured in community. The roles to raise a family traditionally. Now in 2004, what remains are the traces of that history. Blind as his compliments and commitments to me rolled off his tongue, my perfection was the foundation of his words. I was the one. His past was filled with loneliness and misery. Years of violence and neglect plagued his memory. Drunken lessons formed his life knowledge, all broken branches in a tree of questions. I asked, he wouldn't confess them. He believed, and I believe we were above it. Forget the past, he was safe with me, and I loved it. But it leaked out a little as the pain came in trickles. I was caught in the middle of his pride and his riddles. He couldn't figure out, shut him with a shout. And I tried to understand as he pushed me to get them out. I was quick to recoup. I took the falls, finding nice posters for the holes in the walls. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. One for the road, so we dabbled with a drink. Said he needed to relax, didn't always want to think. I'll admit I was part of it. It kept him happy, brought us closer. Besides, I'm not as pretty or as confident a person when I'm sober. Plus, my connections in the world threatened him. Didn't trust guys, said they're all into the medicine. But the parties were full of the types he despised. Saw the negative attention when he looked into my eyes. I guess I presented it to everyone, my harsh intentions, and I sure as hell pay for it seconds after it was mentioned. The glass hit my lip, felt the floor as I slipped 3 or 4, trying to loosen his grip. My love's eyes burned like molten lava, bored into me. Then I saw the recognition on his face of my injuries. Tears of apology spilled and joined me on the floor. He was just trying to have a good time. I had to wreck it. He lifted me up, and then a bottle said, take a sip. But it was difficult to drink with a fat lip. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. Man, wake up. You're dreaming of the past when you were one and needed a role in the cast. That winter morning, cool, clean, when the hunt's at its best. You had no arrows, took your knife and stabbed your girl in the chest. No family to bring her home to as they're already at rest. Carried on the tradition of alcohol and violence. The city stripped you clean of your culture's hopes and dreams. The pen walls continued to remind you of your girl's screams. It was love, no doubt, but how you do it burned out long ago when you should have stopped the cycle from carrying through. Now the son who you created saw the things you do and will probably pick up where you left off too. She wanted to save you so bad, should have saved herself first. What could have been the best thing you had took a turn for the worst. But don't live off regret. She's gone, move on, but don't forget. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. Too sick to stop the cycle, hammer this nail into my head. Living in the cost of a culture lost, some say I'm better off dead. So that one I wrote, as I say right in the song, in 2004. And this was one of my first songs. It received a lot of attention in different ways, and I'm happy for that. This was another piece written in reaction to loved ones that were in abusive relationships. I really needed to get to the complexities that find extremely intelligent, kind, powerful women in these positions of helplessness. I use this song as a voice for those that can't speak for whatever reason. This song goes back to pre-contact ways of companionship, and then it fast forwards to the dysfunction that is normalized in our communities. It addresses cycles of addiction and abuse and questions these sicknesses as if they are and if they are curable. It's about the loss of roles and the patriarchal influence into gender and actions of men and women. And when I say some say I'm better off dead, it's that feeling of utter hopelessness that many feel in these situations, that I felt in that situation trying to help. It doesn't offer solutions because at that time I couldn't comprehend any. I had so much response to this song, some good, some bad. It's viewed and listened to thousands of times on YouTube. Um, if you Google Too Sick, TOOSICK, by Eekwol. You'll see like we shot the video in Toronto, and that was my first experience of shooting a video. We got a Much Music grant to do that, and it was really cool. So I got a lot of response to that. But this is why I like writing the story behind the story, because at that time, I was a lot younger, and I saw this stuff going on around, and I didn't know how to process it. Now I could, answer my own questions in a lot of ways, just, being in school and just having life experience. But sometimes my songs and music don't have solutions, and they are what they are. They're just there. You interpret them however you want. So what I want to do, we have a couple minutes left. I want to share with you one that I just wrote in the last couple of weeks. Well, no, maybe the last couple of months. Who knows what time it is these days? I always say every day is like a Saturday and a Monday all mixed together. So this one is one that I wrote that's kind of hopeful. I call it Southern Sunset, and we all know, the sunsets in the West. But when we're shifting and trying to, change systems and trying to change, the way things are, sometimes you have to actually shift sunsets. You have to, you know, rebalance and decide maybe the sun needs to set in the south for a little while. So this is that song. Southern sunset, shadow on the wings of a thunderstorm, hear it sing. And now I look to the west, rhythmic rumbling, feel it in my chest. If I move, who will follow? If I stay, will I wallow? I held it in my hands, so delicate, ran it through my fingers just for the hell of it. Quiet my breath as I wait forever. And there's no telling if we're in this together. I'ma ride till the wheels fall off, and when they fall off, then I'll have to stop. But if I stop, that's not the last of it, and if it lasts that long, it'll be classic. Generations coming full circle, liberators carrying the workloads, dropping truth bombs, putting the masks on. Are we all in? Don't even ask, cause fall in line and move towards the hush of thousands of spirits backing us like a southern sunset, shadow on the wings of a thunderstorm, hear it sing. And now I look to the west, rhythmic rumbling, feel it in my chest. If I move, will follow. If I stay, will I wallow? I told myself it's okay to feel weak. There's no knowing what lies in the deep. Some are gifted, but never open theirs. And some use and abuse theirs beyond repair. And some seem to find it in the strangest ways, like begging for a piece and throwing it away. Propped on a pedestal, guns in the air, all buried in the mundane and trying not to care. I told myself it's okay to fail, cause there's no knowing when this rain will turn to hail. Trust your instincts, put that tobacco down, and when the storm clears, you can listen to the sounds of thousands and thousands of spirits backing us like a southern sunset, shadow on the wings of a thunderstorm, hear it sing. And now I look to the west, rhythmic rumbling, feel it in my chest. If I move, who will follow? If I stay, will I wallow? Today's weight, pushing past the tomorrows. Today's weight, pushing past the tomorrows. Thank you so much.